sun. To dream, believe in strength. Now I'm the only one, only one.
Hi, this is Jared Quan, the League of Utah Writers historian, and I'm joined today by the amazing Amanda Luzzader, past president of the league, writer of the year, award winner, and amazing person all around. And so I'm super excited. Thank you so much for joining me this morning.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Well, awesome. So we've talked about a lot of things over the last couple of interviews. We've talked about what it's like to lead the league, what it's like to see the different conferences and how things go. I really wanted to start this one off by asking a little bit more about what it was like when you were sitting in the audience and your name was called for Writer of the Year.
Oh, do you know that was it was a really special feeling, I guess. It had been a stressful day. I had been one of the presenters at the conference that year, and there were some other stressors going on, and so it had been kind of a frantic day. But I was dressed up like I like to do for the banquet, and so I was sitting there feeling pretty, which is always a special feeling. And it was just a surprise to hear my name called. It's not something I don't know that I was expecting. Um, I guess it was kind of shock at first, and then just feeling really happy afterwards. So,
That's so cool. And you looked absolutely amazing, by the way.
thank you.
Everybody, there's a lot of people who dressed up, and you looked fantastic that
Yeah,
evening.
I want to encourage everyone, like, let's dress up a little more.
Yeah, let's make it a little bit more of a formal thing. I love
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Now I know that before, leading up to that, you had a couple of really neat accomplishments. I know at that point you hadn't started writing full time. That's a more recent thing, but you had some books out, and you've already won a boatload of awards. What books did you have before that?
Um, let's see. I think I had I've had lots of short stories published in a lot of anthologies, but as far as actual books that I had out, I think I had Creepbacter, which is a horror anthology that I wrote with my husband. So a collection of short horror stories. And I had Among These Bones, which is a post-apocalyptic novel. And I think I also had When It's No Longer Night, which is the second book in that post-apocalyptic series. It's hard for me to remember dates.
I know, I know,
I think that's what I had at the time. So
and that was amazing. I'd, of course, written in some of the short story anthologies that you were in as well, and seeing all of the breadth of things that you had accomplished. So I was super excited when you won Writer of the Year.
oh, thank you.
It was really
The
cool.
the thing I think um, why I was selected for the Writer of the Year, and I obviously was on the committee who made the decision, but I got to see my nomination right up that Carolyn Campbell read at the award banquet, and a lot of it was actually about my work as a grant writer, which you think of Writer of the Year and we think books, but there's different types of writing, and I had done a lot of grant writing work for the nonprofit that I worked for, the Family Place, which is a child and family support center. So they have things like a children's shelter and therapy and emergency and respite care for children. And I had, through my writing, um, been able to get millions of dollars to support children and families in my county and throughout the state of Utah. And I think that is maybe what my peers were nominating me for is the writing that I did with grant writing, and I appreciate that a lot. I dream of someday being a bestseller and selling millions of books and things like that, but I'm not sure anything I ever write as a fiction writer will ever be as important as the writing I did to bring money and funding to projects that help children in our state. And so to have that be included as part of the Writer of the Year award really, really meant a lot to me um, because I consider it to be some of the most important writing I've ever done and maybe ever will do. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Matter of fact, for those of you who don't know, like grant writing is a whole different creature altogether. Like it's when I started my writing adventure in the world and I thought fiction was, kind of like the same writing everywhere. I was so wrong. I wrote for Sports Illustrated and sports writing is dramatically different, but grant writing is probably the hardest. I've had the opportunity to write a couple of grants and that was
mhm.
so hard. Like people don't really appreciate the the detail and attention that has to be put into it, as well as the information that needs to be included, as well as making it sound attractive to groups. I mean, grant writing is a really tough creature, and that's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the whole point of grant writing is to try to get money, get funding for a certain cause or for a certain purpose. And I think actually my fiction writing, though, um, helped me with my grant writing because you kind of, you could be very technical and give a lot of statistics and things like that. But you have to remember that the people who review grant proposals are human too. And if you can reach them with a story, get them to feel something, that's a lot more effective than just giving them facts and figures. And so I feel like the fiction writing I had done complemented my grant writing because I was able to take actual real life stories and kind of write them in a way that they would be appealing to donors and to funders, and try to help them understand what it feels like to be in the situations that these children and families were in. So it is very different type of writing, but there are, some crossovers. And sometimes when I wrote federal grant applications, the applications would be hundreds of pages long, and just the narrative part would be like 100 pages. And that was a lot of writing. And if I hadn't already been writing novels and known that I could write hundreds of pages, I think I would have been really intimidated by having to complete projects that were that long on my own. Um, so I feel like I my writing as a grant writer and as a fiction writer, they've both benefited from the two types of writing, even though they are, as you said, very different.
That's pretty awesome. I love the way that you put that because, yeah, absolutely. That storytelling is vital to people seeing what your vision is for the funds and why it's needed is really awesome. Is incredible. Now let's kind of switch gears a little bit. What are some of your fondest stories of the league?
Well, probably my very, very fondest memory of the league actually comes from when you were president, Jared, and it was at your conference, and it was when my now husband Chad proposed at the conference. Um, Chad and I, for those who don't know, we actually met at our local cash chapter of the League of Future Writers and had been friends for a number of years and writing partners long before we started dating. And so the League of Utah Writers, in a sense, is the reason we met, and we had a lot of friends, mutual friends in the league. So it felt really, really fitting that when he proposed, he chose to do it at the league's year end banquet with all of our writing friends there, because writing did play a huge role in our relationship and continues to do so. So that one was definitely memorable. Um, Another memorable time was the year before that, when we were at the banquet, and Chad was actually involved in an accident. I had to leave the banquet to take him to the
Oh
emergency
yeah,
room.
that's
That was
right.
a fun time. But then I think just all of the conferences, anytime that I have um, learned something new, or I think for myself, just every time I've gone to a conference, I just come away so motivated. And it's like, maybe I'll be discouraged or feeling lazy or something like that. And you go to these conferences where there's new information you haven't heard before, or there's other like minded writers, and it's just kind of, I don't know, lights the fire again, and recharges me, to continue even during difficult times. There was lots of uh, keynote speakers. I remember Barry Eisler, when he was the keynote speaker, he talked about self-publishing, and at the time, like, that wasn't something I even viewed as an option. Like, I was just, you write your book, you get an agent, you go and try to get one of the big five publishers, and if you can, then you go with a smaller publisher. And Barry Eisler, who's this very successful author, was the first one. It was like, you can be your own publisher, you can do independent publishing. And to see someone who was doing that and was being successful kind of broadened my perspectives, I think. And now I am myself an independent publisher, um, and without having heard Barry Eisler, and meeting him, and having that experience, I don't know if I would have been open to that. Jack Remick taught me a ton about writing. Rob Carver. I'm trying to remember who else. Of course, my mind's going blank. But um, Owen Edgerton. These were classes and talks that had a profound impact on me and my writing. Dean Wesley Smith, he was another really great one. There's been so many writers that have come through the league conferences and shared their information, and we've really had a wealth of information over the years. That for someone like me, who's been coming for nearly 10 years, I have gained a lot of information, and I wouldn't even be able to explain to someone everything that I have learned, because it builds up slowly over time, until suddenly you're like, wow, I know so much about writing and I know so much about publishing that it would be very difficult to even try to verbalize everything that I know.
Yeah, I totally understand. And I'm in the exact same place. It's funny. I was telling Johnny, actually Carolyn, I was telling her that before I learned about the league, when I was really off in the cosmos on my own, I really didn't even have a great writing group. I heard about writing conferences and I thought, okay, what is there going to be there that I can't get on YouTube? That's what I thought initially. And then when I attended a conference, I was blown away. It is so different, and the information that you get is vital. But on top of that, it's being able to ask a real time question and get a custom fit answer to your need, or it's hearing stuff that you didn't think was relevant to your writing,
Mm-hmm.
and and then the breadth of information that's provided at the conference, I had no idea. So I was blown away, and I'm very pro conference. I think
Yeah.
anybody should go to a conference if they get a chance.
Well, the other thing with the conferences, I agree with everything you've said, but like maybe you could find the information in a book or you could find it online, but like are you going to go like look all of that up? Are you going to take the time, to go and read that all? But when you go to a conference, it's like, okay, I have a class, I have a class, I have a class, and it's like kind of just jam packed. And in a short amount of time, a day or two, you can get a ton of information. And I'm kind of a lazy writer. I don't know how much I would be willing to go out and search for information and read it. I do. Sometimes, but to have it just, like all I have to do is show up and it's going to be fed to me at a conference, I think that's really beneficial. And there's something different, as you said, being there in person and being able to interact with the presenter and being able to ask questions as you're thinking of them. And I don't know, I think it's just received differently than if you're reading it online or if you're watching a YouTube video. There's some kind of different energy when you're there live. That's why it's so sad that COVID's canceled all of our conferences
I
lately. I've got
know.
my fingers crossed for next year.
I know. That's been the greatest challenge. I work with a lot of conferences, as you know, and it's been so interesting to see the dynamic. How do we capture that conference feeling, but virtually? And really, you can't capture all of it. I mean, you can capture little pieces of it and facets, which are great, but there is something missing out when you're sitting next to somebody in a class and you ask a question and then you find out, hey, they write the same thing I do. Hey, what? And then you link up and suddenly you gain a new friend, or you hear somebody ask a question and you're like, that's the question I really wanted to ask, but I was a little too nervous because this
Hmm.
this presenter's probably a little intimidating to me. That happens
Yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, and definitely we're missing out on the networking opportunities.
Well, awesome. So, what do you think of the league now and its future? That's kind of a loaded question.
um, yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of the league, and I feel like it brought me a lot of opportunities. And I think it's a great place for writers, especially starting out, to find community. I think having community is absolutely vital to being a successful writer, a successful author. So there's definitely community to be had by membership in the League of Utah Writers. And I suspect that's the case from its very beginning, and definitely is the case now. Um, did you say where is it going? I don't
So,
know. Where would I like to see it go?
yeah.
It's a good question. Do you know, I just want to see it, get even bigger, just in terms of like the caliber of authors that we can get. Having been the president, I know that once you reach a certain level, like if you want to get a famous author, it's going to cost a lot of money, like maybe $30,000 or more, depending on who the author is. But I would like to see the league grow to the point where we could, afford to have some big star author come and share their knowledge and information with us. And the same with agents. Like I said, I am self-published. But in the future, I might want to look at some hybrid options. And I love the idea of meeting with an agent face to face rather than sending in a query letter and having it go through the slush pile. I would always pick pitching in person over sending a query letter. And so, yeah, more agents, bigger presenters. And then I would just like to see more value perhaps given to members so that when they pay their membership dues is very clear the benefit that they are getting. And maybe that's in the form of like discounts to writing programs or services or other classes. I'm not sure, I, but yeah, I just would like the value of the league to be really apparent. That it'd almost be like you're crazy not to join.
Absolutely. You and I are in a very similar mind in a lot of pieces when it comes to where we would love to see the league go. And matter of fact, you and I had very almost identical goals
Hmm.
for growth of the league and introduction to more people, more places, get people excited and on the same page. I would love for it to be a no brainer. Like, why am I not a part of the league?
Yeah.
Like that doesn't make any sense. So I totally get that, and that's the one piece, and this probably and we'll come back to another question, but that comes down to advice you would give to leadership, because I know that you and I, having been in leadership, we have visions that we really work hard towards, and we get a lot of feedback, and feedback could be like, this was good, this was bad, which the feedback's always nice, but
Hmm.
seldom. I mean, oftentimes I wouldn't get actual suggestions. Say, like, I would say, they would say this is bad. I would say, okay, cool. Like, what would you prefer? And then oftentimes they would just go something else. And
Yeah.
that was,
Just you figure that out.
what kind of advice would you give to leadership at this point?
um for the current leadership, I would advise them to remember that anything that the league accomplishes now and anything that we are able to do is only possible because of the work that was done before. I unfortunately have been present when things from the past have been criticized, whether that's our website or conferences or other leadership. And I just can't imagine what it would be like, considering that this is an organization of volunteers, um, to maybe have been the volunteer who made the website and then to hear someone later say how crappy it was. That would just be so incredibly hurtful. And I don't agree. I think we've always had the best that people were able to do, and that circumstances at the time were able to allow. So to look back and criticize anything instead of looking back with gratitude, I think is a big mistake. And I think when that has been done, it's actually off-putting to those volunteers who are probably still in the league and hearing those things. And I suspect we lose some membership over comments like that. So I would strongly encourage leadership, and I'm not just talking about the executive uh, council excuse me. I'm talking about anyone who is in a leadership position, so board member, chapter president, conference chair, any of those positions. You should respect our own organization and our own membership and show gratitude and not criticism for what has been accomplished. Um, I I think we need to not be our own enemy, if that makes sense. So that would probably be my biggest advice. My next piece of advice is more personally for them is to remember to take care of themselves, because running an organization of this size and that is statewide does take a lot of time and work and energy, and you can easily just kind of get consumed by that. I think I was in my year. I had a stressful year, and I wish that I had taken more time, like, for self-care for myself. Um, and like when I was the president that year, like my writing completely stopped. Completely. I didn't write at all that year. And I actually had a really hard time starting back up after I was no longer president. And I personally lost something from that. And I think if I had put myself more of a priority, and taken care of myself more, maybe that wouldn't have happened. And I think I could have, I don't know, had, I think the league would have benefited um, from myself and others taking care of ourselves too. I think we can be better leaders when we're not stressed out. So I guess those are my two big pieces of advice, just from my own experiences and what I've witnessed, is not to criticize the work of volunteers, and to be grateful for what's been done before you, and then second, to keep in mind yourself as a priority, and do some self-care and take some time for yourself.
I love those. I love both of those. And that's why I love having the opportunity to be the historian. I,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I've been working really hard for, because a lot of people don't understand. And then when they don't understand something or don't realize why things are or were a certain way, then it was like easy for them to criticize those things.
Oh, absolutely.
And
Yeah,
yeah,
like I can think of like conferences that were um criticized for not, being very big. And at the same time, I'm like, well, do you know what the budget was like that year? Do you know
right,
what problems the president that year inherited? And um, like it's easy to just assume that circumstances then were the same as they are now. Um, but I happen to know they weren't. Um, and yeah, so like you can't, and technology has changed so much too. You can't really compare how things are today to how they were previously. And everyone who volunteers their time for this organization is giving us something incredible. And we would not exist. We would not exist if it was not for the work of previous volunteers. And so, for that reason alone, we should be showing gratitude and appreciation for what was done.
exactly, absolutely. And that's what I'm hoping. I'm working on a project with some of the league leadership, um, to expand the depth of knowledge for people at their fingertips who are brand new to the organization, who don't understand its history or situations. Not that it needs to go in
Mhm.
incredible detail, but just give some perspective. That way they can understand where they're at, and understand what the organization had gone through at different points. Because exactly, everybody has their own challenges, and it's so easy when you're on the outside. Now it's funny because it's true for any organization. Like I've seen people do this for obvious nonprofits that are trying to do good, like the Red Cross. They're like, oh, they're wasting all
Mhm.
this money on this gala thing that they're doing. I'm like, yes, but do you understand what they're getting out of it? Do you understand
Mhm.
how, what kind of work went into that? What I love is that I love the thought of being grateful for everybody who came before, to
Mhm.
have the opportunity to still be here and exist. Because there are so many times where the organization could have easily have just kind of slipped beneath the waves and disappeared.
Oh yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and then there's so many. It's crazy. There are so many times where I was talking with an individual, and they're like, "Hey, I was a past president of the league," and I'm like,
Mhm.
"You
There's
were?"
so many.
Like,
Like
I had no
when you have
idea.
an 80-year organization, there's been a lot of people involved with the leadership who maybe aren't anymore, but they were before. And that's why I say, when you're speaking publicly, or um, in any place, there really shouldn't be a reason for us to um, denigrate our own people.
Mm,
Uh, And I don't get me wrong, I am not saying that we should not try to make improvements or make changes for the better. I'm not saying that at all. I'm saying we should do that, make the improvements, make changes, but there's no need to criticize what's already been done. It's not helpful, it's not kind, and it doesn't show the appreciation those people who did work before are due.
yeah, and everybody's giving everything that they can,
Hmm.
which that's a whole different, like, when everybody has a life, they try to have a life, and they give time to the organization. they're giving a lot, and some people don't understand that because some people don't, in their own perspective, don't have the same kind of challenges, so they don't know. Okay, this person who gave only 10 hours of volunteer work this year to the organization, and I was able to give 100 hours. That individual's contribution, it doesn't make it any less great
Right?
as my
Yeah.
own, because everybody has is trying to do the best they can with what they have, which
Well, and everyone's needed to.
mhm.
Sorry to interrupt you.
No worries.
Uh, we need, the 10 hours from one person just as much as we need the 100 hours, and no one person can do it all alone. Or they shouldn't do it all alone because it won't be as good as if they did it with others.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, and I've seen a couple of times where I had met past presidents of the league, and they were no longer members of the league because they had literally burnt themselves to a crisp
Mhm.
in their volunteer work. They gave so much that they could, like, they felt like if they were in the organization they would have to continue to give even though they're no
Mhm.
longer in leadership, that they're like, I need to distance myself, and just became kind of a shell of the person they were before they
Yeah.
stepped into that role. So it's absolutely vital you take care of yourself, like you were saying. You gotta be aware of that, and like it could damage relationships if you're not careful. Not just your writing, it could damage your health. It could damage so many
Mhm.
pieces. So yeah, take care of yourself. And
Yeah.
it,
I'm like, I wish I'd done that. but but hopefully the leadership going forward will not make the same mistakes I made. Hopefully each leadership group learns a little bit from the one before and does better. That's what we hope.
well, perfect. So I really want to finish this off. All these amazing interviews with you, which you are one of the most amazing people. I hope people seek you out just to talk to you, because you're an amazing person to just talk to and hang out
Oh,
with.
thanks. You
Um,
too, Jared.
uh, I want to see, what advice would you give to new authors and aspiring authors?
I have lots of advice for new writers, and I love talking about writing. So if anyone ever wants to, talk to me in person, hit me up on Facebook or something, because I really love talking about writing, or look for me at conferences. But I do have, some advice I could just share briefly. The first is to be cautious. There are people who take advantage of new writers, who are looking to make money for themselves, and they will try to sell you products and sell you classes and um, you know services that you don't need, that won't help you and will just take your money. I would especially be cautious of people with marketing who say they can either do your marketing for you or can teach you a class. There's a good way to know if someone is a good source to learn about marketing, and that's to look up their own books and see how they're doing. And if their primary store for sales is Amazon, and and they're claiming to be able to teach a course on marketing, and their own books are in the 3 millions or 4 millions or 5 millions, maybe they're not the best source to learn about how to do ads, or to learn about marketing. Um, Kind of the proof is in the pudding thing. Now, that's not to say um, they could definitely be useful to take a class from. What I'm talking about are people who are charging $600, $1,000 to teach you marketing when they're obviously not able to do it for themselves. So that's a caution, is to be careful of where you give money, especially large amounts of money, um, for services related to writing books. And along that lines, if you decide to indie publish, look out for what are called vanity presses. If a publisher is asking you to pay money to have your book published, that's probably a vanity press. And what they do is they charge incredible amounts for ordinary things like editing. They'll charge like 10 times the cost and they'll ask you to pay for it. And they won't, they don't make money from selling books. They make money from charging authors. And so, yes, that can get your book published, but you could do the same things that they do for much, much less, and be better off for doing it. So avoid vanity presses. You can always do a Google search about the press, the publishing company, to see if they're a vanity press. You can ask in writing groups, but generally the rule is if they're asking you to pay money to publish your book, it's probably a vanity press and you should avoid them. Other writing advice, my very first series I wrote was Among These Bones. It was a post-apocalyptic book, and I didn't know then about the term writing to market. And what that means, writing to market, is to know who your intended audience is before you even start writing the book, and to know like the expectations certain reading groups have. For example, like romance readers want a happy ending. And if your book doesn't have a happy ending, romance readers aren't going to like it. And so I didn't know about, knowing about the market and knowing their expectations and what tropes there are for genres. I just had an idea and I wrote my story. And it was very hard for me to sell that series because I didn't even know like who would be interested in it. Like, what other books did they read? What books were my book like? It was just kind of an island, and I don't regret writing Among These Bones because I learned a lot from it. But then my next series that I'm actually in the middle of now, which is a middle grade series, Mermaid in Middle Grade, it's been such a different experience because it's almost like the book just sells itself. Like, it's so much less work to get sales. And the primary difference is I wrote to that market instead of just writing a book. So my advice there for the new writers is kind of twofold. The first is to understand your reading audience before you write the book and what things they look for in books. And the second one is to always keep writing the next book. If I had just stuck with Among These Bones, that series, and just spent all my time trying to sell that book and trying to sell that book and trying to sell that book, I probably never would have started this other one, and I would have been all caught up in trying to make a profit when maybe that wasn't. I mean, it did make a very small profit, but trying to make a lot of money from a series that wasn't going to make a lot of money. And I learned from that series. I learned a lot, and it helped me to do better when I wrote my next series. And I believe this series will help me to do better when I write my next series. And so I would always say, don't get caught up on what you've done. Just keep moving forward and write the next book. And because you don't know which book is going to be, your life's work. Like, if you write one book, you could think, well, this is the best book I'm ever going to write. Like, your first book is the best book. You don't know what's going to be your best book. So keep writing. And yeah, just keep going. don't stop with one book, because your writing gets better, your marketing, your branding, everything gets better the more you do it. And yeah, I just say keep going and keep writing books, and don't get too caught up on the success or failure of your existing book. Like, it's not really that important, because as a writer, if you're pursuing this as a career, your job is to write, and to keep writing. That's your number one responsibility, is to write. And I think there is nothing that you can do that can advance your career more than putting out more words and getting more books out there. If you think about it, like maybe you have written 7 books with mediocre success, and then you write your 8th book. And this actually happened to Hugh Howey when he wrote Wool. He'd already written, I think, 7 books before that, but Wool was a breakout phenomenon and did incredibly well. And then, of course, after people read Wool, they're like, well, what else has he written? And suddenly his other work got a lot of notice. And so it's just like, don't like spend too much time trying to force things. Just keep moving forward and learning as you go and trying, but don't stop and don't settle for just 1 or 2 books or one series. Keep writing books. Keep going. Sorry, Jerry. I feel like I've been talking for a long time now.
No, that is tremendous advice. One of my favorite things is when I tell people that they probably don't know what they're really good at writing. I said people will say, "Hey, I'm great at writing fantasy." I'm like, "Oh, so have you tried writing the other genres?" And they're like, "Well, no, I just love fantasy." I'm like, "That's great. I love that you love fantasy. Try writing some other stuff. You might actually
Yeah.
surprise yourself. You might not know that you are a phenomenal horror writer. You might be an amazing Western writer that you just didn't know because of the way you process information, the way you put it down on paper, might just really resonate with that audience, and you don't know because you didn't try. So yeah, I love that. Keep moving forward, and don't be afraid to try new things.
Yeah. I never thought I'd be a middle grade author. Like never, never, never. And I just, I don't, I wrote that series because my cover designer designed a cover with a mermaid on it, and I just liked it so much. I'm like, I'm going to write a mermaid story, and then I just fell in love with it. Like it was so much more fun for me. And when writing is fun, it's a lot easier than when writing is not fun. Like um, I remember when I was writing the last book for my Among These Bones series, I did not write that series very quickly. It took several years, and I was kind of burnt out on it. Like I was like, I'm just done with this story, and it was so hard to get that book done. It was just like a battle every time to write, and then writing these middle grade stories, it's just like, oh, I get to go play now, and I just have so much fun writing them, and it's so much more enjoyable. So I don't. I'm not saying that I'm never going to write books for adults, but I am going to stick with the middle grade genre for a while, just because it feels like such a good fit for me, which is surprising. I never would have guessed that I'd be writing middle grade, because my history is in horror and science fiction um, stories for adults. So it was a weird turn, unexpected turn. And like you said, if I'd never tried that, I wouldn't have known. So yeah, but try writing different things and see what is a good fit. Because once you find it, um, it changes a lot of things. And I wouldn't say like reading middle grade is not my favorite genre. Um, it's definitely not. I do enjoy middle grade books, but it's not the main books that I enjoy reading. Um, so it's not necessarily, unless I'm the exception, it's not necessarily the books that you love to read, although it could be.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that advice. That's probably my favorite advice to give to people or talk to people about. And I love working on short stories. I never thought I was ever going to write short stories. I thought I was always going to just write novels and I was going to push out a ton of books. And that's just how life was going to be as a writer. I didn't realize the challenge that short stories bring. And I know you've won a lot of awards in short story work and the challenges that comes with short stories. Would you recommend short story writing for new authors or people starting out?
I would for the for an for new writers. For now that I feel I'm more established in my career, I don't find short stories to be as profitable because when people go to buy books, they aren't generally looking for short stories. They're usually looking for a novel. Um, but I think you can learn a lot about writing and a lot about keeping your reader's attention with a short story. And it's a way to kind of build up your writing confidence. But also, because like I had probably, I don't know, 2 dozen short stories published. And I think it was a way for me to gain experience with publishing as well. If you're going the traditional route where you want to have an agent and go with a traditional publisher, I would definitely recommend writing short stories and working on getting those published because that's something they'll take into consideration. Is if you're new to publishing books and you don't have any books published, but you've had these other short stories published, it kind of speaks to a level of ability um, that you can use to your advantage, I would guess. Like I said, I didn't go the traditional route. I've got my little kitty's waking up. She's been sleeping on my lap this whole time.
Aw. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Short stories aren't typically profitable. I mean, if you have your own anthology with short stories for people who are already fans of you,
Mhm.
it could be very effective. I found that short stories can be effective in teaching, of course. But what I love is when I see well established authors who are working on big projects and then they'll toss out a short story as kind of like fish food. It's just like I want
Mhm.
something from this author. Okay, I get that you're working on a big book and it might take you a little while. Oh, a short story comes along. Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic. I just
Well,
want to
and
gobble that up.
the another thing that short stories could benefit, sorry, um, is you can use it as a way to introduce people to your writing. Because maybe, especially if you're not a well known author, it might be hard to get someone to pay money to try out your books. So if you offer them a free short story, which doesn't take much to do, you can give that to them for free to introduce your writing and your storytelling ability to them. Then you might be able to convert them into being a reader of your full size work. So short stories definitely have a place, and I would encourage anyone to increase their skill and ability in writing short stories because you can leverage that in a lot of ways to help you with a writing career. And you can see that like from writers in the past. Um, I'm suddenly blanking on the name. The man who wrote Great Gatsby. He has
Hmm.
a ton of short stories and would sell those and make money off of the short stories in between novels being published. Um, and authors and writers today can do the same because it just doesn't take us long to write short stories um, as it does a novel. And I actually find writing short stories to be quite fun. Like that's just something enjoyable. So if I'm stuck on a novel and having writer's block, I might just switch and write a short story in between just to kind of get the creative juices flowing again. So I don't know where I was going with that, but yeah, there are benefits to being able to write a short story, and there are lots of ways you can use that to your advantage.
Yeah, that's one of the things. I didn't mean to drag on the short story stuff, but one of the things I noticed is when I went to a Comic Con or FanX or different conferences where authors were actively selling their books. It was tough because their book cost $15 to $20. And
Hmm.
somebody walking past, they're like, "Why should I spend $15 to $20 on your work? I don't even know who you are, right? Sure, the story
Uh-huh.
sounds cool. What I noticed was a lot of people starting to do the short story, and it would just cost them $1 to hand out or for free. So here's a sample. Like it's like a short story prequel to this book, and then they would read and get to meet a character really briefly, and they'd go, you know what? This is worth that extra money, and then they would buy that book, which is kind
Oh,
of neat.
really?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that. I'm going to be at FanX 2021. It's been confirmed, so I'm looking forward to that. So I like hearing what others have done there because I've never been to FanX before. I'm a little nervous because I know a lot of people go there. So
It's really fun, and I love selling books at there because there's people who expect to buy books and there's people who don't expect to buy books, and it's really
uh-huh.
fun to talk to all of them, which is really neat. Well, cool. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with me in these different interviews. It means so much to me, and I know it's going to mean a lot to the league and the history of the league. Now that we'll have this, stored for all time and eternity until digital media goes away, or elevated to some other platform. But one of the things I really want people to take away is, like you were saying, everybody in leadership has had their own struggles and successes, and we work really hard. And I want people to know what everybody's gone through. That everybody worked really hard, gave part of their soul to this
Mhm.
organization to see it thrive and succeed. And I wanted you to know for sure that I'm incredibly grateful. And I
Oh.
hope others are as well as they look back and see what it took to make it survive some of these really tough times that they may not be aware of, may not understand. So thank you
Well,
so much.
thank you, Jared, because you have also given so much. Being president yourself and now serving as historian. That's something after I was president, I'm like, no more, no more, no more. So you were a volunteer before you were president. Is one of the reasons why um, we were considering you for the presidency because you were already such a dedicated volunteer, and I think you've shown through your actions, the level of service that you've given, and it's very, I think, a selfless thing, Jared, that you've done. A lot of people have benefited, and I personally know how much time it takes, and I know you have your family, and they're your top priority. And so for you to still volunteer so much time for a writing organization, especially in the interests of helping new writers and helping other writers, that's something to be commended. And so you tell me thank you, but I say thank you. So,
Thank you. I'm kind of blushing over here. I didn't
uh,
expect. Well, excellent. I do plan, like I mentioned before, getting some individuals together so we could do multiple people in an interview. There are many people on my list to interview. I'm hoping to get Tim Keller, Emily Wheeler, so many people who have spent many years volunteering in the organization. I want to hear their stories. Of course, I would love to get many of you together to hear some of the stories that you might not have thought of up front, but then you'll think of
yeah.
together, which I think will be exciting.
Oh yeah, I'd love that. That would be awesome. And Tim Keller and Emily Wheeler would be awesome choices to interview, especially Tim Keller, because he was president for quite a long time. Because when he was the president elect, you'll have to check with him for the exact details of this. But I think the president that year had I don't know if they had a medical issue or something, but they had to step down, and so he had to kind of step in early and take over unexpectedly without having that advanced training gear. But um, Tim Keller was absolutely vital to the league's success and for a lot of the benefits that we enjoy now. So he would definitely be a good choice for interview. And I would love to do a group interview with Tim and Emily and others. It, Tim is in my chapter, as you know, and we have so much fun when we go to dinner after our our meeting, he can get us all laughing, and so I think that would just be a really fun thing to do a group interview. The secrets will come out.
Awesome. I'm looking forward to it. Well,
Yeah.
perfect. Thank you again so much for joining me, and I look forward to those future times.
Yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you later.